So, on a scale from basic Sunday school student to biblical scholar, where were you on the story of Moses before you started this project?
Well below Sunday school.
Below Sunday school.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no idea. So, Charlton Heston.
So I understand you were kind of a voracious reader and researcher, though, correct?
Well, there's just so much interesting material, obviously. The Torah, the Pentateuch, which takes a bit of getting through. That took a bit of time. And then, a number of other sources that people recommended to me. One of them that I enjoyed a great deal was called Moses, A Life by Jonathan Kirsch, and then there's Legends of the Jews, and then it just keeps going, and the Quran as well.
I mean, that's a lot. I can only imagine the man-hours.
Not all in one go, right?
What did you find particularly elucidating or interesting in all of that reading?
The big one for me, other than realizing that I really had no idea about Moses at all, and just how complex of a character he was. And he really was a very troubled and tumultuous man, very mercurial. But the biggest surprise for me was the nature of God, that he equally was very mercurial. And although Moses was able to talk directly with God, there's an episode where God actually tries to kill Moses, where he threatens to wipe out everybody but Moses and starts again, somewhat like Noah, and Moses has to convince him otherwise. The really fascinating thing to me is that there's absolutely no mention of the afterlife at all. And coming from, since Moses was from Egypt, where there's an obsession with death, that seemed, I was very surprised by that as well. And that also there's really, other than Azazel, this kind of literal scapegoat, there's really no mention of the devil. The God is described as a God of good and evil, all in one. And all of this was absolutely fascinating to me in news.
Now, it was the first time you're working with Ridley Scott, but my understanding is that you guys were friendly. What was the nature of the relationship before this movie?
Admiration on my end for him as a filmmaker. And then I'd worked with a number of actors who had worked with Ridley and who had said to me, you guys would get along, you should work together. So Ridley and I met up and just talked a little bit and said, let's find something. And I think that was about 4 years or 5 years ago. And then he turned up and said, I've got something. And he said, it's Moses. I said, no. Like, sort of swords and sandals. He's like, just straight up Moses. Okay, all right.
And what were the early conversations that the two of you had? Did he talk about the scale? What did he talk about that he wanted to bring to it?
The biggest issue was about how much you could include, because it's so dense. You really could make an 8-hour-long film, and so there had to be a choice about how far we went with the story. And it's called Exodus for a reason. It's not called Moses. And we, Steve Zalian, who wrote the screenplay, really felt that it was a story of revolution. And so deciding just to focus up to and through the Exodus. I'm sure you can see there we went through the crossing of the Red Sea. But then it was very tricky to decide, well, how much further can we go here? Because every little bit that you thought, well, you can't not include that, would have added another half an hour to the film. So there was always sort of regret that you can't help that, of what you unfortunately just cannot include. I'm not sure how long the film is, but 2 hours or whatever.
You say it's not called Moses. There was a project called Moses. It was a TV movie 20 years ago, and the guy who played Moses was Ben Kingsley.
Yes,
So in the moments where the two of you were acting opposite each other, did that come up?
Yes, I said, oh, yeah, I played Moses. I'm sorry I've not seen it. And he just laughed. And, because I sort of avoided, other than, all right, the very first films, and Ben Kingsley's one of my favourite actors. Part of the reason I didn't watch it is because there's times when it's a wonderful thing to steal from other people. And I don't sort of say I was inspired by it, I just go, you're stealing from them, you know. But then, you know, there's other moments where you go, wow, I'll probably end up taking so much that, no, that's not a good idea. I have my own idea, let's stick to that. But the very first film that I rented immediately after a meeting with Ridley, and whilst I was still trying to get my head wrapped around it and thinking, is this even something that could be possible, I went and rented The Life of Brian. Which is a real favourite film of mine, and a beautifully made film, wonderful film. But the point being that not only do I enjoy that film a great deal, but that anything where you are approaching it from a very earnest point of view can unintentionally become The Life of Brian very quickly. So it was sort of a guiding light throughout for me. You know, and I must confess, always look on the bright side of life was kind of always humming through my head an awful lot. And then immediately after that, I rented Mel Brooks' History of the World. You know, he comes down, he says, we've got 15 commandments, he drops one and says, oh, we've got 10 commandments. And you know, because you sort of have to get that out of your system, and you have to understand what is it that we could unintentionally make funny. And you have to have humour with something that is as earnest as this, and as heavyweight as this. You have to have an element of comedy in your everyday life during filming, because otherwise it just becomes too exhausting.
Sounds like the most fun prep ever to watch these movies. Did you rewatch 10 Commandments, or did you rely on your past?
No, yes, I did. I did rewatch 10 Commandments, and you know, the thing that the main difference that I looked at is, you know, you can't out Heston, sharpen Heston, right? There's no point in trying to do that. But in my reading from looking at the 5 books, was that this was an incredible weight that he was lifting on his shoulders. That this should be something where you see a man who really is straining, and you know, that is of his nature. He fought very much against being chosen by God. He kept on saying, no, it's not me, it's not me. He kept on trying to get out of the gig when he was on the mountain. And it was something that was, you know, I mean, you can imagine, this is not an easy job. And I felt that with the 10 Commandments, it was very much sort of an uplifting doves, and, you know, and like he was, you know, sort of the Moses, and that was sort of flying almost, like he was going to levitate through the scenes and everything. And I felt like ours should be someone that is kind of just desperately trying to keep moving forward because of the just enormous pressure that this is on him.
Was it nice to finish the process in the hair and makeup trailer and look at yourself in the mirror and think, wow, I actually look attractive after American Hustle?
We were very, you know, when I was making American Hustle, when Ridley was sending me Steve's scripts, and then when I first got back from Boston, I went in to see Ridley. My head was absolutely shaved right down to the scalp, and I still had all of that girth. And he really tried to not show a look of absolute horror at who he had cast. But the nicest thing he could say was, he went, oh, your hair's very short. As he looked at me. I was thankful that I was in sort of these loose-fitting sort of tent-like clothes throughout, because I was desperately trying to lose weight throughout. You know, I just didn't feel that would be fitting.
There's also a lot of guy liner in the movie. Did you enjoy that?
Well, in the Egyptian part, you know, these are people who lived as gods, and therefore there is a reputation to uphold and a beauty, you know, that they must convey. Yeah, you know, I've done a glam rock film before, so I was quite good at putting my own eyeliner on.
There's many other incredible actors in this film. Obviously, we saw really intense people. We saw Ben Mendelsohn up there, Ben Kingsley, Aaron Paul. Were there people that you particularly felt jazzed working with in this cast?
I think it's a fantastic cast throughout. I very much enjoyed working with Joel, who, you know, we were sort of the constant throughout. Obviously with Ben, there's so many good actors, but I really enjoy also when you're working with actors whose names you wouldn't know. I always enjoy that as much as possible, you know, and as another actor, when you know very little about somebody, then it's a very nice thing because you know, there's nothing predictable at all.
The scale of this is obviously huge. My understanding, there's 120 horses in some of the scenes. There were 400 people whose jobs it was to make, you know, the objects in the film. Is it at all daunting to be at the forefront of a production that is so massive and has so many people working on it?
Yeah, you know, because I'm a real prat, and so you just sort of go, wow, look at that set, that's a kilometre long, that's amazing, look at all the people, what are they waiting for? Me? Oh no. How am I ever gonna, you know, get through this? And so you act it, you know, you arrive, and that's the whole point, you know, you act it as though you can handle all of this, when in truth, absolutely, you're going, really, Ridley, you should have picked somebody else. I can't possibly do this. But to me, that's not an unhealthy thing, you know. I mean, I think the day that I looked at something of that size and thought, yeah, that's me, I should be in the middle of that, I'd probably just, you know, hate myself.
Clearly, the animals on screen are a mix of the real thing and digitized versions, but I understand there was a day where there were 400 frogs on the set.
Oh.
What kind of interactions did you have with the real life beasts?
I mean, I imagine with the frogs there was a lot of stepping on them, I would think. I wasn't actually there for the frogs at all. You know, I was around a lot of horses who were kicking each other and trying to bite me, and camels who, you know, as we were crossing the Red Sea, they like to, you know, relieve themselves a lot. You know, you just sort of get used to less than glamorous situations and things popping up against you that, you know, you go, oh yes, that is what I think it is. Past me.
What did you actually enjoy about the different locations?
You know, we shot down in southern Spain, in Almeria, in a desert location for some of it, which was used for most of the spaghetti western films, which was news to me. I assumed that spaghetti westerns were shot in Italy, but so I was calling paella.
Paella western doesn't have the ring.
No, right. And that was kind of beautiful in its absolute severity. But then we went to one of the Canary Islands, one of the less inhabited ones, called Fuerteventura, and there's a beach there which is just phenomenal. It's the beach that Ridley uses for the crossing of the Red Sea, and it just seems prehistoric, and you know, with you know, hundreds and hundreds of extras, and you know, the animals and everything. That was a truly stunning place.
One thing that I was surprised to learn is that if I'm correct, the armor that you're wearing is actually made of car bumper rubber. Was that? Yeah, as opposed to metal. Was that more comfortable?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, well, it's much more comfortable to wear a car tyre than metal.
Car bumper.
Car bumper.
Right. One thing that I find interesting is that, given the fact that this was a shorter shoot than we all would think, you had 2 movies that opened while you were making this, if I'm getting the calendar correct, Out of the Furnace and American Hustle. Did the production just hate you for having to leave to do your press tours? Did it feel weird to come back here to the States and do junkets in the middle of this huge production?
It was kind of a real nice relief, and Ridley produced one of those films anyway, so no, he was all good with it. Yeah.
And then the last thing I'd be curious to know is, I remember doing an interview with you last year, and one of the questions I asked you was, of all the movies that you've made, what's the one that gave you the most nightmares while you were filming it? And your answer was you played Jesus in a TV film. What about this one? Did that have a similar effect on you?
No, not at all. Because usually I just enjoy how sort of silly what I do is, and that you can. It's silly, but you know you want to see how far you can push it in a creative way, and but with this one I found that the character was so consuming and exhausting that I was actually far more just myself than anything I've ever done before, because I couldn't sustain the intensity of that sort of a character and still last, you know, it was I think 74 days or whatever, which is very quick for a film like this, but lasting the hours and everything, it just was too much, and so I said I have to do a different thing on this one.
And then final bonus question, favorite Ridley Scott movie of all time?
I guess, I mean, you know, the one that keeps coming into my head is Alien, but that was also, it was a lot of fun watching it with my friends. It was a lot to do with the evening as well. He's done so many wonderful films, but I get that's the one that I was just keeping on going in my head right now.
I will accept that answer. Christian, it's great to talk to you. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. Good night.